Okay, so I wanted to ask you about your portfolio. The RBA saying increasing wages will simply drive up inflation. There is also evidence around wages are increasing, not as much as inflation because of the labour shortage. You say you will increase wages in government. How? And won't this just drive up inflation?
The RBA has made clear that if wage growth goes to no more than the inflation level plus productivity, at the moment productivity is running at 1%, then you don't actually have inflationary pressure. What's happening at the moment, though, is far less than keeping up. People are going backwards. Now, the concept of it taking so long for people to be able to get in front again is exactly right from the RBA governor if government doesn't act.
OK, so how are you going to do it? Are you going to have a Bob Hawke-style accord? What's your plan?
Look, the first thing is you look at all the ways, effectively, that the wages bucket is leaking. You look at all the different ways that wages are being undercut. It's happening through rorts with labour hire, with same job, same pay. It's happening in the gig economy, where the government won't even guarantee that minimum wages should be met. Yeah, I never thought the hardest question you could ask the Prime Minister of Australia would be, should every Australian be paid at least the minimum wage? Their answer is that's complicated.
But what are you going to do?
We'll regulate the gig economy. We'll set minimum standards. And the gig economy is not just the apps that you might have on your phone. Like, you've probably got Uber, you've probably got some food delivery apps. A whole lot of the NDIS is now delivered through the gig economy. A whole lot of the care economy. People are effectively employed by an algorithm in a race to the bottom for what rates of pay people will accept.
Do you want to lift the minimum wage?
Oh, we want to be able to see the minimum. We want to be able to see the minimum wage continue to go forward. Now, the current process, where that's at in submissions in terms of the timing of the election, is very late. But I've been going through really carefully through what the government's had to say there in their submission. I have more to say about that later in the campaign.
All right. Just finally, I wanted to ask you about boat turnbacks. You were Immigration Minister when offshore processing was reintroduced, when Kevin Rudd became PM again. Take us through that. Why did you not use turnbacks at that time? How do they operate? And are you confident a Labor government could implement them? Because Scott Morrison says you can't.
Operation Sovereign Borders remains unchanged. And with Operation Sovereign Borders, General Campbell came up with a way. Now, how they're doing it now, it's probably continued to modify. But at the point when things changed in 2014, came up with a way of effectively transferring people to a different vessel, which hadn't been possible even towards the end of the Howard years, because the vessels were being spiked, they were sinking, turning into a safety at sea issue.
Yeah, so
once General Campbell came up with that transfer method, now we'd previously proposed a transferred method with planes. Scott Morrison spiked that with the Malaysia agreement, and half the people who drowned after Morrison had spiked that. But in terms of the transfer arrangements that were developed through Operation Sovereign Borders, that was a game changer. It was a good idea. We had already reduced the number of people arriving by boat by 80% through the changes that came in when Kevin Rudd returned and I became Immigration Minister. So a big shift had already happened. That final change that was made by General Campbell was the right policy, and Operation Sovereign Borders continues under us.
But just very quickly, we're out of time. Why are you axing temporary protection visas? Aren't they a good deterrent?
They're irrelevant. The boats stopped at a time, and people forget the chronology. When the boats
but why
were
not
stopped,
just leave them in place?
When the boats were stopped, they were in place. Temporary protection visas were abolished sometime after the boats had stopped. We're now in a situation where you've got people who are living in Australia who are not going back and are just going to be told for the rest of their lives that they don't quite belong. Yeah, it's not in anyone's interest to do it that way. People know that people on temporary protection visas, it's a huge processing cost, that effectively the government's keeping it in place, even though no one knew's going on to them. The government's keeping it in place simply to keep a political argument going. That's not in the national interest. It's not required for operational sovereign borders. It's not something that, that is a difference in politics between us and the government. It's a difference in how we treat those individuals. It's not a difference in terms of whether or not boats arrive.
Tony Burke, thanks for your time.
Great to be here.